the first part of our second module here, we're actually going to talk about the different SBIR and STTR agencies. And because this could probably be an 8-hour presentation if we dove deep into each one of the agencies, we're really just going to give you kind of that high-level overview, because in this same module, we actually have a breakdown for each one of the agencies where we talk about their mission, their funding levels, what they typically look at, what they consider innovative. We really want to just do a quick kind of introduction here into the different agencies so that it'll help you navigate the rest of the module and the rest of the information in that module. So let's start off with the Department of Defense. So the Department of Defense really is all about protecting warfighters and protecting, their mission. DoD is a contracting agency, so they have issues that they want to solve. That means that they are actually looking to buy things in the future. But you have to also find a customer that's outside of the DoD. They don't want you to just create a solution that is something that is only fit for them. How can you modify it? How can you strip away the quote-unquote green paint and sell this on the open market? Now, DoD is a little bit different. They do fund 3 times a year, but DoD has individual service components. There's like 13 of them. And each one of those service components might have different proposal package requirements. In fact, almost all of them do. Different levels of funding, different periods of performance, different ideas about what they're looking for, and they can even have different cycles. So even though DoD has a typical cycle where they will open up a they'll release the topics. That's called the pre-solicitation period. It's about 1 month. You're able to directly contact technical points of contact, or TPOCs, and kind of find out more about their problem, why they need to solve it, and what they see for a solution and how it needs to integrate into their operations. And then once that month is up, it goes into open competition. And at that point, it actually opens the portal so that you can submit a proposal package, but it does close off that ability to contact TPOCs directly. You're not allowed to do that anymore. Any questions have to be submitted through their open question and answer form. But even though they already have those kind of restrictions and requirements, certain service components might actually offer out-of-cycle opportunities. They're usually called BAAs, Broad Agency Announcements. So DoD is one of those ones that you really have to pay attention to. You have to look at the topics each time they come out to see if you might have a solution for them. You have to kind of pay attention to which service components are when, whether it's an SBIR or an STTR, because DoD does participate in both. What is that opportunity that they're looking for, and do you have something that might actually suit their purposes? Next is NIH. So the National Institutes of Health is actually part of Health and Human Services. That's the technical agency name. But if you look up HHS SBIR, you're not going to get very far. They just group it under NIH because that is the largest portion of their topics and what they fund. Now, CDC and FDA also play into that space, but they typically don't have a lot of depth on their topics. NIH is also a little bit interesting because since they focus on all aspects of health, their solicitations are a little bit, let's call them strange. So each year NIH will release their omnibus, and that's just kind of that overarching umbrella. Now the omnibus really only gives general programmatic information. NIH will also release a research topics document. that research topics document actually dives down into the different institutes and centers, because under NIH there's 27 of them, and focus on what does each one of those institutes what are their missions, what are their goals, what aspect of health do they want to help address. Now, because NIH is a granting agency, they're not going to buy solutions. So you kind of have to figure out who's actually your customer. Is it different from the end user? Is it different from the person that's going to benefit from this solution reaching the market? But the biggest caveat with NIH is they fund 3 times a year. They have solicitations that will close 3 times a year, but then they also have targeted opportunities. So you have to know the difference between the targeted opportunities and then just the regular research topics. But the other wrinkle to that is that different institutes and centers under NIH actually can have different levels of funding. So very similar to DoD and the different service components, NIH institutes and centers kind of are all over the place. Some of them may follow the general guideline, so roughly 52,000 at this time for 6 months, or some of them might be 700,000 for 2 years just for that phase 1. So one of the things you really want to do with NIH is actually reach out to that point of contact for that institute and have an open discussion with them first. Is what you're working on a fit for what they believe is important for their institute? Is what you're working on a fit for where they think research needs to go, where they think the focus needs to be in the next 5 to 10 years? Having that initial conversation is very important for letting you know what's your actual ceiling for an award. What do you need to scope towards and what do you need to budget for? National Science Foundation is one of the stranger agencies, let's call it that, just because NSF doesn't really have a research focus. Their research focus is science. So they look at pretty much everything that's out there, as long as it's science and discovery. It can't be an incremental evolution. It can't be a simple engineering project, but it can be anywhere from, geology to chemistry to mathematics to software development, whatever it is, as long as it's revolutionary and as long as it has a lot of commercial potential, they might be interested in funding it. Now, NSF also breaks the mold in that technically they don't have solicitation closes anymore. You see, you start the process off by submitting a project pitch. And the project pitch is really just kind of a 3-page introduction into what are you working on, why is it important, who's going to care about it. If your project pitch is approved, you have a year to submit the actual proposal package. Now, during that year, they have submission windows. And they do vary from year to year, but a submission window, let's say, will close on September 2nd. The next window will open on September 3rd. So NSF is pretty much always open. And the reason you need to pay attention to the submission windows, though, is that the submission windows are actually kind of a cutoff. So if you submit a project pitch and it comes back as declined, you can actually refresh it, rework on it, resubmit that pitch, but not until the next window. Same thing with proposals. So you submit your proposal, and if you submit it right after the window opened, you're going to be waiting around a few months, because for the actual proposals, the submission windows are more of a guarantee for when it's going to be reviewed. So if you're working and you're almost finished and a window's about to close, you might want to try to get it in during that window, just so you get some information back, just so you get some feedback. So you're not sitting there waiting an additional 3 months to hear about, well, what's the status of this? Did it get funded? Is this something that y'all will actually fund or are interested in? NASA's a lot like DoD. So NASA is another one of those direct contracting agencies because they want to buy solutions. However, NASA typically doesn't buy many solutions. They'll buy a handful of them. You really have to focus on the outside opportunity for NASA. But again, NASA does have those very focused kind of topics, those very focused problems that they're trying to address and solve. And it really does match their mission. But one of the things that makes NASA kind of an enigma, and it's a similar thing with DoD, is people get these ideas in their heads about what DoD is interested in and what NASA is interested in. So, typically people think defense, they think weapons, they think rockets, they think, chemical warfare, they think armor and tanks. But there's a different side there too. There's that humanitarian side. There's that people protection side. There's even logistics and health. And just like DoD, NASA's not just about, rockets and getting people in space. It's also about keeping them healthy. It's about new upgrades to maybe telemetry. It's about new materials that can, provide better conductivity. It's about being able to support people on long endurance space flights. NASA's not just about, hey, I got a better telescope so y'all can, see stars better. It's also about those, humanistic factors. Now, NASA does only fund once a year, and NASA kind of is very similar in that pre-solicitation phase, where you do know what the topics are before it's actually open for submission. And sometimes those topics can change based on the questions that the authors get. So if you need more information, if you need clarification, definitely reach out to those topic authors. The last one we're going to cover in this first 5, and I'll tell you the reason for that here, is Department of Energy. So Department of Energy is a weird almost mix between a granting agency and a contracting agency. DOE is technically a granting agency. However, their topics work a lot more like a contracting agency. Twice a year, they'll actually put out topics, and they'll have their intended topics, what they're looking for, what they're focusing on, the challenge for it, what they want to address. And a lot of times they'll be very focused. So even though you can submit an idea about them that will answer that or address that in a wide range of areas, you do have to kind of line up with what they're looking for, even though they are a granting agency. Now, DOE is a little bit different in that you have to submit a letter of intent. DOE is the only agency where you essentially have to say, hey, I'm applying, here's what I'm applying with. And the LOI is not exactly like the project pitch for NSF. You can actually still continue on with a submission if you get a less than stellar response to your LOI. But it's kind of frowned upon because just think about it. If they didn't want to know more about what you're working on, if they didn't think it was a fit, do you think they're going to fund it? It's one of those things that you really do want to submit the LOI and you really do want to get positive feedback on it before going through the motions of creating a proposal package. Before we talk about USDA, one thing to kind of highlight here is the 5 agencies we just talked about. They were the first 5 because they're the 5 agencies that participate in both the SBIR and STTR programs. Now, some of those 5 agencies can actually have different topics depending on whether it's an SBIR or whether it's an STTR. But the next set of agencies here are only SBIRs. So our next agency is USDA, the Department of Agriculture. And Department of Agriculture is pretty much just exactly as it sounds. They're interested in ag. So they're interested in, crops, food safety. They're also interested in forestry. They're interested in animal care and animal welfare. They're interested in, value-added products, things that can be made by, non-food crops. But one of the things that's very interesting about USDA is that they have two topic areas: small and mid-sized farms, so what can you do to help farmers, and rural and community development, so what can you do to help rural areas actually grow, thrive, and economically prosper. And those are worth kind of highlighting because those two topics are really the only topics across all of the SBIR and STTR programs that allow you to have a COTS solution. So commercial off the shelf. You can actually come into them or those topics with a fully developed product and still get funding, as long as you're answering their focus and their need under those two topic areas. So it's worth looking at USDA, even if you have something that is fully developed, you're already selling it, but maybe it can actually help a rural community. Maybe you are in a rural community and you want to be able to have that community grow, thrive, and economically develop and prosper. Or for the small and mid-sized farms, maybe you have a solution that can, be further tailored towards those small-sized farmers to, take the economic burden off of them, or help out their workforce, or whatever else they're looking for under those topics. So kind of keep that in mind, is that USDA has, I would go ahead and call it, the most unique opportunities out there under the SBIR program. Department of Homeland Security, there's not really a lot to talk about here with DHS. It's almost a natural fit. You think DHS, you think border protection, you think customs. It's also worth noting that they're also like Coast Guard, shipping, stuff like that. One of the things that makes DHS outside of the normal, though, is that DHS actually has a mechanism for submitting a topic to them. So if you have something that you think matches their mission, matches their focus, matches where they want to be in the next 5 to 10 years, you can actually submit a topic to them and say, this is worth exploring. I think this is worth funding. And Department of Transportation has the same exact ability. So just like DHS, you can submit a topic to them. Now, DOT deals with everything travel. You think, highways, you think railways, which is, it does line up. That is typical. But surprisingly, DOT is about things like pipeline infrastructure. So the, various pipelines that run through the cities and through the countryside, carrying water, carrying fuel, carrying oil, carrying natural gas, carrying whatever it is that they're carrying. But DOT is looking for solutions that can help out issues that plague those particular things. So traffic management systems, better railway navigation, things to keep vehicles from getting stuck on the tracks, early warning and detection systems. Things like that are all right up DOT's alley. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, they want to protect the environment. They want to mitigate, things like climate change, things that impact our environment, things that impact our health due to the environment. So they look at those type of areas. NIST is a little bit of a different one. NIST is one of those enigmas that nobody really knows what NIST is. until they start diving into it. So NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technology, not only are they, cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, measurement technologies, NIST is typically the agency that sets up the standards by which, electronics operate. So if you have a standard that for how data is transmitted across a cable, and typically that's been NIST certified. So it's interesting to approach NIST if you have something along those lines, because NIST can help make that standardization a reality, and then that puts you in a perfect place for your commercial potential. And then we have NOAA. So NOAA is the Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, or Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So they're all about stewardship of the air, of the ocean. You might think, well, that sounds like it has a lot of crossover with EPA. And, sometimes it does, because our air and ocean is part of our environment. We have to protect it. We have to manage it. We have to mitigate it. But whereas EPA is more focused on, things like those protection measures, those mitigation measures, NOAA is also about, the monitoring, the sensing, having a better understanding of our oceans and atmosphere. So coming up with, new submersible unmanned units that can actually map the ocean floor and, take measurements and help us understand how earthquake activities lead to how earthquake activities lead to tsunamis. Be a heck of a world if earthquakes led to typhoons. But just about having a better understanding about the world around us. That's, kind of what NOAA focuses on. And lastly here, we have the Department of Education. So Department of Education, the SBIR arm is actually called the Institute of Educational Sciences, or IES. IES is all about technologies or solutions that could be fit into a learning or classroom environment. Now, I say learning or classroom environment because it's not just about, new curriculum for, 12th grade math students. It's also about those, social skills, those things like understanding of banking and finance, those things that can lead to, after-school programs, better, more well-rounded STEM or STEAM education. All of those factors that not only provide better understanding and learning to students in a natural school setting, but also that alternative learning setting. So what makes them more well-rounded? What makes them, more ready for the workforce? What can you do to make sure that they're, it sounds dumb, but they're a more complete person when they graduate, that they're ready for that big, scary outside world? So IES is not only about the formal education, but they're also about informal education. So kind of think about that when you're looking at, is IES going to be interested in what I'm working on? Or who is interested in educational technologies? So it's just a very brief kind of overview about all of the different agencies under the SBIR and STTR programs, what they focus on, who's who, what's what are some interesting facts about them, what do you need to know, and what do you need to approach. If you're still confused about the different agencies, navigate the rest of this module. We have really good breakdowns for each agency. And then if you're still trying to figure out your focus, you're figuring out who's going to be interested in funding your idea, contact us. We'd love to be able to talk with you, work through how you could fit towards different agencies, discuss your focus of the innovation, discuss how you want to grow, and discuss where you want to be. A lot of times that can really help you figure out which agency is going to be your best bet.